There are moments in life that signal a lasting shift. They appear unexpectedly, frequently disguised as something banal and change everything in their path. For me, it happened on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday afternoon. I had just completed folding a load of laundry, my hands occupied with the familiar task of stacking towels and arranging socks. My stepson Evan had moved back in a few months before, and his presence was a continuous reminder of the developing void in my marriage to Victor. At 55, I had become accustomed to isolation even though I shared a home. Victor's business kept him gone most days, allowing me to maintain the appearance of a functional family. The shower had been running for a while. The muted sound was barely audible as I strolled down the corridor, the laundry basket nestled against my hip. My mind was elsewhere when I passed the restroom door, which abruptly opened. There he was, Evan, fresh from the shower water pouring from his hair, his body sleek and naked in the cold light streaming from the bathroom. For a single second, none of us moved. My breath hitched as I understood what I was seeing, and my sight darted automatically downward before I snapped back up. His cheeks flushed hot as he hurriedly turned, reaching for the towel he'd left hanging on the washroom rack. "Oh my God, I forgot my towel," he stammered, his voice stiff from shame. Evan, I didn't see anything," I said, even though we both knew it was false. I thought sorry, but I didn't believe anyone was. His words spilled over themselves as he quickly wrapped the towel over his waist. I'll simply gesture vaguely toward his room, backing away, with a rush that nearly knocked the laundry basket to the ground. My cheeks burned as I ran down the corridor, my heart pounding in my ears. I spent the rest of the afternoon repeating the event in my thoughts. I tried to persuade myself that it was just a foolish, embarrassing mishap that we'd joke about later. But the fact was that I couldn't shake the vision. The vision remained clear and unmistakable, bringing with it a rush of perplexity for which I was unprepared. By the time supper arrived, the tension between us was evident. Evan averted my gaze, keeping his comments brief and courteous, while Victor discussed his newest business venture. I too remained quiet. My mind was racing with notions that I had no business pondering. It should have ended there. It should have been a brief, unpleasant experience that both of us forgot over time. But life, I've discovered, has a way of complicating even the most straightforward of situations. And that moment was not easy, not even close. Following that afternoon, Evan and I experienced a transformation in our relationship that none of us could fully understand. The tension was faint but palpable, as if a thread had been stretched too tightly. Victor, on the verge of breaking, was blissfully unaware of the underlying tension within the home. Caught up in his continuous phone calls and late nights at the office, Dad would sit at the kitchen table droning on about acquisitions and market shares, while Evan and I exchanged awkward glances over our meals. For the first several days after the incident, I tried to avoid him whenever possible. I confined my tasks to sections of the home where I knew he would not be present. I also made an effort to avoid entering the living room when he was watching television. However, avoidance exacerbated the stress. One night I couldn't sleep and strolled into the kitchen at around midnight. The home was dark, and the only sound was the quiet hum of the refrigerator. The sound of footsteps shocked me as I reached for a glass from the cupboard. "Can't sleep either." Evan's voice sounded from behind me. I turned and clutched the glass like a lifeline. He stood at the doorway, dressed in a t-shirt and sweatpants. His hair, slightly mussed from what I believed was an unsuccessful attempt to sleep. No, I said, attempting a grin. I thought some tea could help. He nodded and moved closer. Same here. Mind if I join you? I hesitated but nodded. Of course not. We worked quietly for a minute. He filling the kettle while I retrieved tea bags from the cupboard. It seemed odd standing so close to him in the middle of the night. The uneasiness from earlier in the week remained between us, but neither of us voiced it. While we waited for the water to boil, Evan leaned against the counter. Their arms folded, he started talking quietly about the other day. I froze, holding the counter's edge. We don't need to discuss it, I said immediately. I think we do, he responded. It's been odd since then, and I don't want it to continue. I looked into his eyes for the first time since that day. The earnestness there took me by surprise. It was an accident, I explained, my voice barely above a whisper. Let us forget it ever occurred. He nodded slowly, but the expression in his eyes said he wasn't persuaded. In the days that followed, I began to notice details about Evan that I had previously overlooked. He grinned while lost in contemplation, the sound of his laughter while he watched one of his favorite comedies. He wasn't only gorgeous, that was how he carried himself. He had gained quiet confidence since his previous stay here. One evening, I was folding laundry in the living room. He walked in and collapsed onto the couch, his long legs spread out in front of him. Want some assistance? He questioned, nodding toward the pile of garments. I laughed quietly. Do you even understand how to fold a fitted sheet? Nope, he said with a grin. But I can pretend. He moved closer, taking one of the shirts and mimicked my moves. It was a brief, innocuous moment, yet when our hands met, I felt my breath catch. I swiftly pulled back. Hopefully, he didn't notice. You okay? He questioned, his face furrowed. Fine, I said a bit. Too hastily, just exhausted. He didn't push, but the way he looked at me stayed with me long after he had gone to bed. Victor mentioned another work trip over breakfast one morning. His tone neutral. I'll be gone for approximately a week, he explained, scarcely looking up from his phone. Another one, I asked, trying not to sound relieved. He shrugged. It can't be helped. You'll be okay here, right? I nodded, my thoughts already racing. The house felt different when Victor wasn't there. Everything became quieter and more personal without him present. That evening, while I sipped wine on the back patio, Evan joined me. He held a drink in one hand and motioned to the empty chair near me with the other. Mind if I sit? Go ahead, I murmured, smiling despite myself. We sat in comfortable silence for a long time, watching the fireflies sparkle in the warm summer breeze. Evan replied abruptly, You seem happier when he's not here. I looked to him shocked. What do you mean? He shrugged and sipped his drink. I do not know. When it's just us, you feel more like yourself. His remarks caused a ripple effect in me, something I didn't want to define. Don't be foolish, I responded, attempting to laugh it off. I am serious. He continued, his tone mild but firm. You, Lillian, deserve to be happy. I glanced aside, my throat tightening. It is not that straightforward. It may be, he suggested. It happened late one night after Victor had departed on his trip. Evan and I were watching a movie in the living room, and the screen's illumination produced lovely shadows over the room. The wine I'd been drinking had made me brazen, and I found myself moving closer to him without realizing it. Neither of us moved as the credits rolled. Lillian whispered softly, barely audible. I turned to face him, my heart thumping. Yes. He paused, his eyes probing mine. I'm not sure what this is, but it feels like something. I opened my lips to reply, but nothing came out. Instead, I stretched out my fingers, brushing across his. The contact sent a shock through me, and before I could stop myself, I leaned in. It was timid at first, a delicate contact of lips that conveyed all we couldn't express. However, as the moment progressed, it became clear that there was no going back. The following morning, the house was abnormally silent. I awoke early, the weight of what had transpired between Evan and me crushing down like a heavy blanket. I waited in my room for longer than normal, pacing and planning what I would say when I met him. What can I say? Was it a mistake that it would not happen again? But even as I considered it, I knew it wasn't true. The recollection of the night before was still too vivid, packed with a type of intensity I hadn't experienced in years. When I eventually stepped out, I discovered Evan in the kitchen. He pours himself a cup of coffee. He looked up as I arrived, his expression inscrutable. "Morning," he said warily. "Morning," I responded, averting his look as I tended to the kettle. We stood in quiet for a minute, the tension between us palpable. Finally, he spoke. "Lillian," he said softly, "what about last night?" "We shouldn't speak about it," I said abruptly, my tone rougher than intended. "It was a mistake." He laid his cup down, his gaze fixed on me. "Was that it?" I froze, my heart racing. "Evan, this is not right." "I know," he murmured, moving closer. "However, this does not imply that it had no significance." His words hung in the air, and for a time I pondered turning and leaving. But I did not. Despite my vow to preserve our distance, Evan and I found ourselves pulled to one another in ways that seemed unavoidable. It began with fleeting looks and light, lingering touches. However, it did not take long for those situations to deteriorate. He came into the living room one evening as I was folding clothes and sat alongside me. "Let me assist," he offered, grabbing for a stack of towels. "You don't have to," I added despite my hesitant tone. "I want to," he said, his tone firm. We worked quietly for a time, but as our hands brushed, I looked up to see him observing me. His gaze was intense, and his face was impenetrable. "Evan," I started, but before I could continue, he leaned in and kissed me. It was different from the night before, more certain and intentional. Even though every sensible part of me shouted that it was wrong, I did not stop him. The days that followed were a jumble of secrets and snatched moments. We mastered the art of roaming the home without arousing suspicion, as well as finding quiet moments together. Victor's persistent absence made things simpler, but the excitement of our affair was tempered by a continual sense of fear. Every creak in the floorboards, every unexpected sound seemed like a possible threat. While Victor was away, Evan and I decided to go for a drive. We ended ourselves at a remote park on the outskirts of town, where we discovered a peaceful area beneath the shadow of a huge oak tree. "Do you ever consider what would happen if we got caught?" I inquired, lying in the grass next to him. "Of course," he said, turning to face me, "but I also know I don't want to stop." His honesty left me speechless, and for the first time I allowed myself to admit that I too did not want to stop. The first fractures in our delicate bubble showed when my closest friend Elise dropped by unexpectedly one day. "Elise," I shouted, surprised by her quick appearance. "I didn't realize you were coming over." "I was in the neighborhood," she explained, rushing past me into the house. "I thought I would stop by and check how you were doing." "It has been too long." Evan was in the kitchen when she arrived, and I noticed a look of astonishment on his face. "Oh, I didn't realize you had company," Elise murmured, looking between us. "This is Evan," I said quickly, seeking to hide my nervousness. Victor's son. She lifted an eyebrow, and her lips curled into a knowing smile. Ah, the prodigal stepson has returned. Nice to meet you, Evan, he answered. You too, in a courteous but cautious tone. As the afternoon progressed, I couldn't shake the impression that Elise was studying me too intently, her piercing eyes capturing every detail. Several days later, Evan's friend Eric paid an impromptu visit. He was tall and wiry with a fast smile that barely reached his eyes. Eric leaned against the doorframe and said, "Just thought I'd check in. I haven't seen you around much recently, Guy." Evan gave me a short glance before going outside with me. I watched them converse through the glass, their voices lively but low enough that I couldn't understand what they were saying. When Evan returned inside, his demeanor was strained. "What was that about?" I asked. "Nothing," he replied, shrugging me off. But later that night, as we sat in the living room, he revealed the truth. Eric inquired whether there was anything going on between us discreetly. My breath stopped. "What have you said?" I told him. "No, of course," he said, his tone defensive. But I do not think he believes me. Upon discovering this, I experienced a chilling sensation. Our secret seemed more vulnerable than ever, and the threat of disclosure loomed greater than before. The closest we got to being captured was on a Sunday morning. Victor had unexpectedly come home, saying he wanted to spend the weekend with his family. We pretended to be a typical family, with Victor reading the newspaper at the kitchen table, me making breakfast, and Evan lounging on the couch looking through his phone. But as I grabbed for a dish from the cupboard, Victor glanced up abruptly. Evan said in a casual tone, "You've spent a lot of time here recently. Don't you have friends to see and a life to lead?" Evan stared at me before responding, simply trying to save some money until I figured things out. Victor nodded but did not appear persuaded. Later, while Victor took a call in the study, Evan approached me. "We need to be more cautious," he muttered, his tone intense. "I know," I said, my voice barely audible. "I'll manage it." But even as I said it, I wondered how long we could maintain our secret. Victor's unexpected return home after yet another abbreviated vacation took me by surprise. The home was peaceful that morning, with Evan in his room and me enjoying a rare bit of calm on the back porch. When the front door opened, I was surprised by the usual creak. "Victor," I called as I stepped into the home. He murmured, surprised, as he placed down his briefcase and relaxed his tie. "I finished early, so I decided to come back and spend the weekend with you." My heart accelerated, but I faked a grin. "That's fantastic. You should have called. I could have gotten something for supper." He waved me off. "There's no necessity. I am just delighted to be home." But his presence added a weight to the home, a reminder of the lines Evan and I had been straddling. At dinner that night, the discussion was tense. Victor, ever the disciplinarian, was ready to question Evan about his ambitions. So Victor proceeded to hack into his steak. "What is next for you, Evan? You've been here for a long time. Do you believe it's time to start making some decisions?" Evan bristled and set down his fork. "I've been applying for jobs, Dad. It is not an overnight procedure." Victor lifted his eyebrow. "You could have had more results if you hadn't spent the entire day lying about the house." "Victor," I intervened, my voice harsher than I had intended. "He's also been helping out around the house. Grant him some credit." The hush that ensued was deafening. Victor's gaze flickered to me, his expression ambiguous. "I didn't realize you two were that close," he eventually admitted. His tone was easygoing, but with an edge that I couldn't ignore. Evan gave me a short glance, and I realized we'd have to be more careful. As if the tension with Victor wasn't enough, the following week brought Brianna Evans' ex-girlfriend. She arrived on a Saturday afternoon, and her tap on the door startled me out of a peaceful moment in the kitchen. I opened the door, and there she was, tall blonde and exuding confidence. "Hello," she said pleasantly. "Is Evan home?" I froze for a second before moving aside. "He's upstairs. I'll let him know you've arrived." Evan's response to seeing her was one of astonishment and displeasure. "Brianna, what are you doing here? I wanted to see you," she murmured, shoving past him into the living room. "We haven't spoken since, well, everything." I hovered in the kitchen, pretending not to hear while their talk continued. "You can't simply show up like this," Evan remarked, his voice low but forceful. "Why not?" she shot back. "When we were together, you didn't appear to respect limits." When she departed an hour later, her final remarks to him sent a shiver down my spine. "Evan, I'll see you soon, whether you like it or not." Elise's intuition was typically keen, and my recent actions had not escaped her notice. When she asked me out for coffee one morning, I knew she had something in mind. "You've been distracted recently," she explained, swirling her cappuccino. "Just busy," I said, averting her look. She leaned forward, her voice lowering. "Margot, I know you better than that." "What's actually going on?" I hesitated, torn between telling her and keeping the secret that had come to define my existence. Finally, I settled for half the truth. "It's Victor," I announced. "He's been more critical recently, and I feel like I can't do anything correctly." Elise frowned. "And how does Evan fit into this?" My heart races with excitement. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you two seem closer than I recall you being previously." I attempted a laugh, attempting to distract. "He's simply been around more recently. It's hard not to bond when you live together all the time." Elise didn't appear persuaded, but she put the topic aside for the moment. Brianna arrived a few days later, finding Evan in the driveway while he worked on his car. I observed from the window as their talk heated up, her hands moving madly as she approached him. Finally, I could not take it anymore. I went outdoors, my heart thumping. "Is everything okay out here?" I inquired, my voice calm yet forceful. Brianna turned to me, her gaze narrowing. "Oh, Margot, I did not see you there," Evan warned Brianna. "This is not the time." "Oh, I believe it is the ideal moment," she added, crossing her arms. "You know, Margot, Evan has been holding some fascinating secrets recently. Perhaps you'd want to hear about them." My blood was chilly, but I faked a grin. "I'm not sure what you're saying, but I believe it's time for you to leave." She kept my eyes for a time before ultimately giving in. "Fine, but it's not over." As she went away, I looked at Evan. What exactly did she intend by that? "She's trying to cause trouble," he muttered, his jaw tightening. "Do not let her get to you." But the warning in her voice lasted long after she left. Victor's conduct got increasingly irregular as the days passed. He began asking more specific questions about how I spent my time and where Evan was during the day. One evening, when we were sitting in the living room, he quickly turned to me. "Margot, have you observed anything weird about Evan recently?" I froze, attempting to maintain a neutral look. "How unusual is this?" He shrugged, his eyes piercing. "I do not know. He simply appears different. In fact, how you do as well." "Victor." "I'm not sure what you're implying," I responded cautiously. "I'm not insinuating anything," he added, but his tone suggested otherwise. The tension between us had become intolerable. I was aware that a critical moment was imminent. When Elise arrived at the home unexpectedly one day, I should have realized something was amiss. I need to speak with you, she continued, her look serious. I walked her into the living room, my nerves on edge. What's happening? I asked. She hesitated before saying, I believe Victor deserves to know what's going on. My stomach sank. Elise, you cannot. She interjected, I am doing this for you. This is not healthy, Margot. It will ruin you if you do not put an end to it. Before I could react, she rose up and walked towards the door. Please, Elise, I called after her, but she did not glance back. That night Victor addressed me. Elise had gone directly to him and spilled all she suspected. Is this true? He demanded, his voice trembling with wrath. Victor, I can explain. I started, but he cut me off. Do not lie to me, Margot. I need the truth immediately. I opened my lips, but no words emerged. The truth loomed heavily between us. It's impossible to refute. Victor's face contorted in wrath. Get out, he said. Pack your belongings and depart. I don't want to find you here when I wake up. When Victor told me to go, I felt like the earth beneath me had collapsed. The life I had painstakingly established, the home I had diligently cared for. Everything seemed strange. That night I packed a tiny suitcase, my hands quivering, as I put clothes and necessities inside. Evan entered my room, his face pallid and tense with fury. What's happening? He inquired, his voice low. Victor knows, I responded, my voice trembling. Elise informed him. Evan clenched his jaw and began pacing. She had no rights. How could she? It doesn't matter now, I said, sitting on the side of the bed. I need to leave. No, he answered, pausing in his tracks. We'll work this out. I'll speak with him. You cannot solve this, Evan. I replied, tears welling up in my eyes. He will not forgive me or you. Evan kneeled before me, his hands clutching mine. I will not allow you to go through this alone. We'll depart together, if necessary. However, as soothing as his words were, they did not alleviate the dread that was building in my gut. The next morning, I booked into a tiny hotel on the outskirts of town, trying to escape additional conflict while deciding what to do next. But as I sat on the uncomfortable bed, looking at the peeling wallpaper, my phone vibrated with a text. It came from Brianna. You should have known this would not go well. Check your inbox. My blood became chilly. I rushed to open my laptop, my hands trembling as I signed into my account. There it was, an email from an unexpected address with the subject line, "You can't hide." My heart pounded as I clicked it open. Attached were blurry but incriminating photographs of Evan and myself together in times that left no room for interpretation. A statement accompanied the photographs. Tell Evan to comply, or these will get to Victor and everyone else who cares. I dialed Evan immediately, my voice shaking. Brianna has photographs. I added my words coming out quickly. What happened? He inquired, his voice tight with skepticism. She sent them to me and threatened to give them to Victor. There was a lengthy wait on the other end of the telephone before he spoke. We cannot let her do this. We must stop her. How I inquired my desperation clear. He said, I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. Later that evening, Victor called me. His voice was cool, controlled, and terrifyingly calm. I want you to return to the home tomorrow, he said. Why, I asked cautiously. Because we all need to talk. The connotation was plain. Evan would be there too. I remained in a state of dread for the rest of the night, mentally reliving all the worst-case scenarios. The following afternoon, I returned to the house. The air inside was thick with anxiety as Victor led me into the living room, where Evan was already waiting. Victor stood with his arms folded and looked at the two of us. "So here's how this is going to go," he explained. "You are both going to tell me the truth. No more falsehoods, no more evasions." Evan spoke first, and his voice was steady. "It's not as you think." Victor interrupted him with a harsh laugh. "Not what I thought. Evan, I have eyes. I've seen how you both gaze at each other." I tried to intervene, but Victor's attention was drawn to me. "And you," he said, his voice full of hate. "I trusted you. I married you. So this is how you reward me." The room grew hushed, the weight of his words bearing down on all of us. Finally, Evan ended the stillness. "We made a mistake," he said calmly. "However, it isn't as straightforward as you believe." "Oh, it's simple," Victor exclaimed. "You have deceived me, both of you." The doorbell rang before the conflict could develop any further. Victor stormed out to answer it, and he returned seconds later with Brianna. "What's she doing here?" Evan demanded, his voice tinged with rage. Victor narrowed his brows as he replied, "She says she has something to share." Brianna moved forward, a smug look on her lips. I felt it was time for everyone to know the truth. She took out her phone and showed Victor the images she'd sent me. His face became ashen as he scanned through them. "Indeed," he said, his voice hardly audible above a whisper. Brianna smiled wider. "Oh, that is true, but I am willing to make it all go away. For the proper price." "Are you blackmailing us?" Evan asked incredulously. "I like to think of it as reimbursement for the emotional harm you've done," she replied softly. Victor's attention went to her and his demeanor hardened. He replied, "Get out of my house." Brianna blinked, evidently unprepared for his reply. "What, you heard me?" he replied, raising his voice. "Get out before I call the cops." For the first time she stumbled, but she immediately recovered. "Okay," she murmured, heading toward the door, "but don't think it's over." Brianna went, and the home slipped into an eerie quiet. Victor slumped down hard in his chair, scratching his temples. "I can't believe that," he mumbled. "Victor," I started, but he held out a hand to stop me. "I don't want to hear it," he said. "Not right now." Evan stood with a stiff stance. "This is my fault," he admitted. "You shouldn't blame her for it. It is both of your faults." Victor snapped and cut him off. However, just as the tension reached its peak, Elise casually entered. "I believe you've had enough drama for one day," she replied quietly, holding a folder. Victor spoke bitterly to Elise. "Unless you're here to solve this disaster, I recommend you go." She held up the packet. "That is exactly why I am here." She handed it to Victor, who opened it with caution. Inside were records revealing Brianna's history of deception and manipulation, including her most recent effort to blackmail another family. Elise responded, "She is no longer your problem. I've already submitted this to someone who can handle it." Victor gazed at her astonished. "Why are you supporting us?" "Because," she explained, staring at me, "sometimes people make errors and deserve a second opportunity." The home seemed claustrophobic in the days following Brianna's unsuccessful blackmail attempt. Victor had gone to his study, casting a huge shadow over every area. Evan and I avoided being alone together, a solemn realization that anything more would just make matters worse. But the silence was deceiving. I could smell turmoil simmering just under the surface. Elise broke the quiet first. She called me early one morning, her voice brisk. "Margot, you should meet me," she said. Now I inquired, my voice still heavy with sleep. "Yes," she urged, "this cannot wait." Elise had picked a modest cafe on the outskirts of town. When I arrived, she was already waiting. A warm cup of coffee was in front of her. "Thank you for coming," she murmured as I sat down. "What is this about?" I inquired, my nerves already on edge. She slipped a manila envelope across the table. "I investigated more into Brianna's connections. After last week," she explained, "and I discovered something you won't like." My gut twisted as I opened the letter and read the contents. Bank statements, emails, and a series of SMS messages. Elise spoke quietly, saying she had been in contact with Victor for months. I believe she planned this from the beginning. The understanding hit me like a blow in the stomach. Brianna hadn't simply been causing issues out of spite. She'd been collaborating with Victor. When I got home, Victor was in the living room drinking whiskey. He looked up as I went in, his expression inscrutable. "We need to talk," I remarked, my voice harsher than I thought. He motioned toward the chair opposite him. "Go ahead." I tossed the envelope on the table between us. "How long have you worked with Brianna?" His eyes squinted as he looked at the documents. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Do not lie to me, Victor," I snapped. "Elise discovered everything. The texts, money transfers. You brought her into our lives to do your nasty task." He placed down his drink, moving slowly and deliberately. "Okay," he murmured, reclining back in his chair. "I contacted her after becoming aware of the situation. Things between you and Evan. I hoped she could help me figure out the truth. And blackmailing us," I demanded. "Was that also part of your plan? That wasn't intended to happen?" He explained, his voice frigid. "She went renegade. But don't behave like a victim here, Margot. You are the one that deceived me." His remarks wounded me, but I wouldn't back down. "Victor, you've set this family on fire. Instead of speaking with me, you resorted to someone similar to her. Are we talking to you?" He screamed, his voice rising. "How could I talk to you when you were sneaking around behind my back with my own son?" The room went quiet as the weight of his allegation became too much. As the fight heated up, Evan entered the room, his demeanor furious. "What's happening?" he inquired, his voice harsh. "Your mother, Victor Spit, accuses me of conspiring with Brianna to derail your little plan." Evan's eyes moved to me, and then back to Victor. Is this true? Victor's silence provided all the confirmation we required. Evan clenched his hands at his sides. "You had no rights. You had no right to touch her." Victor fired back. "But here we are." Before one of us could stop him, Evan moved closer to Victor, his voice shaking with rage. "Do you believe you are blameless in all of this? You ignored her. You treated her like a prop in your ideal little existence. Do not pretend like you are the victim here." Victor arose, his face flushed with wrath. "Get out of my home." "No," Evan said, his voice calm now. "Get out." The tension snapped like a taut rope. Victor surged forward. His fist landed on Evan's jaw with a terrible thump. I yelled, jumping between them, as Evan lurched backwards. "Stop it!" I yelled, pressing against Victor's chest. "Stay out of this, Margot," he snarled. Evan wiped the blood off his lip, his eyes burning. "Do you think beating me is going to solve anything?" Victor raised a shaky finger at him. "You are not my son. You never were. You're just a selfish young guy who wrecked everything." The words remained in the air. Evan's shoulders fell, the fight fading from him. "You're correct," he said gently. "I am not your son, and I do not want to be." He turned and went out the door, leaving Victor and me standing in the ruins of what was once a family. The house felt eerily silent in the days that followed. Victor entered the guest room, his presence a stark reminder of what we'd lost. Evan did not return, and the vacuum he left behind was oppressive. Elise checked in on me, clearly concerned. "How are you holding up?" she inquired on the phone one evening. "I'm not sure," I admitted. "Everything seems to be falling apart." "You'll get through it," she said, "but you have to pick what you want, Margot. You cannot continue to live this way." Her remarks stuck with me long after we had hung up. A week later, I packed my luggage for the second time. Victor was in his study as I approached the doorway. "I'm leaving," I announced. He looked up, his face haggard. "Where will you go?" "I'm not sure yet," I admitted, "but I cannot remain here." He nodded his gaze, returning to the papers on his desk. "Do what you need to." As I drove away from the house, I had an odd combination of melancholy and relief. I wasn't sure what the future held, but for the first time in years, I felt like I had power over my own life. That evening, I arrived at a motel, my mind racing as I nestled into my strange room. My phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. "I apologize for everything. Please let me know if you ever want to chat." It came from Evan. I glanced at the message for a long time before responding. Perhaps someday. For the time being, I needed to reconnect with myself.